Hello everyone, I hope that you're doing well. Thank you for tuning in because this is an experiment and we need to talk about Spider-Man No Way Home. I know I'm mainly an anime reaction channel at this point, but to be honest, I reacted to both trailers on this channel and I know that they didn't get enough, as much traction as I thought they were going to. Maybe that's because I just reacted to them late, I don't know, but I feel like I need to talk about this movie because it's one of those Marvel movies where it managed to pull off something incredibly unique, and I don't think we're ever going to have something like that again in a pretty long time. I'm gonna talk about it. I did film an initial review when I went to go see it on December 18th, 2021. I might just put clips of it in and throughout this video because honestly, I was just rambling and I was so happy and so excited, but I don't know if I was cohesive. It's crooked. It's off kilter. It's off kilter. I feel off kilter. So we can just discuss the entire movie. It was filled with so many details and I want to get into all of them, but I know I won't be able to in such a short time. So I'll shout out the things that I loved about the movie, and then in the comments we can talk a bit more about other stuff. We already knew that we were going to get Alfred Molina, Willem Dafoe, this guy, Jamie Foxx as Electro, and Thomas Hayden Church. I'm so sorry. I'm not good with these names, but to my credit, I never forgot Alfred Molina's name after that one time. We knew that we were getting all of those people, but Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil, who, by the way, it's also confirmed that he is Daredevil. It wasn't just a cameo, he totally caught that brick with his powers. And I love how Peter was about to grab it as well. I don't know, maybe that was a sign of, hey, don't worry, you can trust me. I am also super powered, a slight nod between superheroes. You protect New York, I protect Hell's Kitchen. We understand each other, right? That aside, that was a lovely cameo. Let's break down some of the villains, all of them. Every actor who played in this movie that we recognize from other franchises literally went above and beyond in their roles, and they each provided a solid, satisfying end to each character. Let's start with the Lizard. I know what happens in all of the Spider-Man movies. Anybody who watched my previous Spider-Man trailers knows that I have seen the original trilogy with Tobey Maguire in it, but I saw them when I was very small, when I was a child. In fact, I didn't even see the end of the first one because my mom didn't want me to see it, and it wasn't until recently, a couple years ago, that I actually watched the ending and was like, oh, that's brutal. I understand, but I can also watch it without flinching now. I saw The Amazing Spider-Man 1 in clips. I didn't see the entire movie, but I saw enough of it to know what was going on and what the motivations of the Lizard were, which honestly were very sad, and I felt very sorry for him the entire time. He just kind of messed with something that he didn't understand fully, and it made him kind of crazy, much like another villain further on down the line. But in this movie, they used a lot of show don't tell with the Lizard, which was interesting because apparently Strange found the Lizard trapped in the sewers of New York and had a fight with him and brought him back to the Sanctum Sanctorum. And Strange looked kind of wrecked. He had a gash along one side of his face. He was limping. He was holding his abdomen at one point, holding his ribs. And I, of course, thought to myself, well, wait a minute. The Lizard kind of relies on brute force to fight, and Strange, as we know from Infinity War and from Endgame, can do so many long-range attacks. I didn't really think the Lizard would have stood a chance. There's something unspoken there, and I feel like just eagle-eyed Marvel fans who caught that and who thought about it, I feel like we might find out what happened in that cavern somewhere. Either that, or the Lizard put up more of a fight, got the jump on Strange, which could have happened, to be honest. The Lizard was a pretty menacing foe in terms of Andrew Garfield's run as Spider-Man. And there was a very specific scene in the final fight by the Statue of Liberty where the Lizard chases Ned and MJ into the school lab, and the cinematography there shifts to mimic what the cinematography was when Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, Peter 3, fought the Lizard in the library in that scene with Stan Lee. It seemed very, very reminiscent and very similar, and me trying to be a cinematography nerd, I caught that. I thought, I love that. I love that they did that. People were kind of wondering, does the lizard even have motivation for being there? And I think, yes, he does. I mean, if you recall correctly, there's this line where the lizard says something along the lines of, trust me, Peter, when you try to fix people, there are always consequences. To me, that kind of makes it seem like the lizard is like basically the Cassandra of this entire movie. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, Cassandra is a fictional character who can see the future, but anytime she tries to tell somebody, nobody really believes her and everybody kind of ignores her, which is exactly what Peter does. I mean, Connors even predicts that everything will fall apart. He says there will be consequences. And Peter is kind of like, but I still want to try, which is of course very Peter Parker. And I mean, to an extent, he does succeed. All of the villains do get cured and they all go back to their respective universes. But even when the apartment starts to break apart and fall apart, I don't know if it's because of his own anger that Peter didn't listen to him, or because maybe he was protecting him from the cameras. I'm not sure. When Peter does try to escape, the lizard does pick him up and say, I told you there would be consequences, and kind of punts him back into the apartment to then get picked up by the Goblin and smashed through 5 floors, which we'll get to that in a second. To me, I think that shows that, like, not only is the lizard mad that Peter didn't listen to him, but also it's like, there will be consequences. Now face those consequences. Don't try to run from this because you dug this hole and now you are going to stay in the hole. I'm not going to let you climb out of it. As for where the lizard goes after this, I'm pretty sure he still gets arrested either way. It depends on when the lizard was pulled from the final fight on the tower, but honestly, depending on when he was pulled, Captain Stacy could still be alive, and I really hope that that's the case, because we need happy things to happen to Peter 3, to be honest. Next villain. Because he's so true neutral, I feel like there are a bunch of people that I've just seen in YouTube comments, just randomly commenting, why did Sandman turn bad? Why did Flint turn bad? Flint has always been a stoic, driven man with really only one goal. He wants to save Penny. He wants to save his daughter. He became a criminal so he could pay for the medicine for his daughter because she's very sick. He was only out for Spider-Man after said web-slinger tried to kill him. The first time that the two had an encounter, he ran off and he got away. He doesn't go looking for trouble. He just does what he needs to and then he leaves. After Peter 2 forgave him, the two parted amicably and that was that. Now he's thrown into another universe. He sees Peter 1. He makes assumptions and he rushes to help him. But once the fight is over, Flint sees that this isn't Peter 2. This is just some other kid. Sure, he's wearing a Spider-Man costume. It's a black Spider-Man costume. Interestingly enough, that might jog some painful memories for Flint. But the moment he sees Peter 1 teleport Electro, using something that could have been a vaporizer for all he knew, Flint's walls immediately go up. Like maybe this kid's nice guy act was all a front. Let's think about this from his point of view. The moment he tries to put up any sort of defense, or the moment when he tries to be on guard to attack, he finds himself in a cell, underground, far away from the forest where he just was. And in that prison, he sees a reptile monster, the assailant that he just helped this kid capture, and two of the most well-known names in Manhattan, both of which are dead, have been dead for years, and at least in his eyes are far more dangerous than what he just dealt with. Not to mention, when some wizard walks in and tries to send them home, Peter 1 fights the wizard, ends up with the box, and then basically delivers what seems to be, from his point of view, a threat. I think I can fix all of you. Let me fix all of you, or you can stay here in these cells until the wizard comes back. And Flint doesn't know when the wizard's going to come back. Flint didn't even know that magic existed. I would put up walls too. That sounds like a threat to me. So, walls being up, he goes along with Peter's plan. He even confides in Electro. He even says he's gonna keep us here until he finishes his science project. We're stuck here. I just want to go home to my daughter. And Electro didn't exactly argue that. Walls being up, he witnesses the Green Goblin firsthand, an entity and a villain that he has only ever really heard about on the news. He sees him sway Electro. He has seen Electro's powers at full force. Flint's just like, nope, I am tapping out, goodbye, and he runs. And I mean, honestly, that is a good reaction to have. There is no sticking around for something like that. And now that it's been proven that Peter's cures haven't worked, Flint's only objective is the box as quickly as possible. If that means that he has to use the other villains as distractions, so be it. I mean, it even says this in the script. He's so true neutral that when Electro even says, I'm sorry to say, Sandman, no one's going home, or something like that, Sandman Sandman actually blinds Electro. It's right there. It says it in the script. Electro is blinded. It says it right there. When Peter 2 does show up, I'm pretty sure that Flint is just done at this point. He's just like, oh my gosh, just give me the box so I can go home to my daughter. I don't care that I know you now. Like, yes, you showed up. Great. Where were you 12 hours ago? Honestly, I don't blame him. I don't blame him. Sandman was the one to basically kick off the fact that Peter tried to save these villains. Norman Osborn and Otto Octavius are both dead because they were killed fighting Spider-Man. It's because of that when Strange is like, all right, I guess it's time for everybody to go home, Peter thinks, oh no, but if they're going to die, then this is no longer an option. I want to save them. Electro. Jamie Foxx was incredible. Even though Electro wasn't the main villain, the movie would have felt incomplete without him there. But they needed like a villain who was primarily offensive. Even when you think about like Dr. Octavius, he was put out of commission the moment that Peter 1 used Bluetooth, basically. The only things that the Green Goblin has in terms of offense, he's kind of like an evil Iron Man. He has the glider, the pumpkin bombs. I mean, he uses his tech as much as he uses his abnormal strength, which we'll get to that in a second. But I mean, strength isn't that flashy of a superpower, so we have Electro. When I saw how they changed Electro, I thought it was a good choice, to be honest. As for the people wondering why we didn't get Electro's blue form from The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which I did see all the way through, by the way, we did have it. If you noticed, it's in the trailer, it's in the movie. When Electro first appears in this universe, he is in his blue form, but he starts charging off of the yellow electricity in the Marvel Universe's cables. So he's taking on this new electricity, which is yellow instead of blue. This movie did a very good job in utilizing the classic looks for the Spider-Man villains. When I was very young, I would watch Saturday morning cartoons like any young kid would. And I remember there was this very specific episode that was about the origin story of Electro. And he had this, he suffered a horrible accident and he had this mask on. And it wasn't until he decided to let loose and be Electro that he became this very sparky sort of being of pure electrical yellow energy. Even like the three prongs on Jamie's face as he charges up at the Statue of Liberty to fire something, even those prongs were reminiscent of Electro's mask. I love that they did that. With Electro, he's actually like the perfect blend of there for humor and there for the actual story. Half of Electro's lines are witty and humorous. Here, I guess with this new electricity, he sort of gained control of himself and became more confident and more level-headed. I mean, he definitely had like this goal of, I found this new energy, not just the yellow sparks, but the arc reactor. I want them both, and in order to keep them both, I have to stay in this new world, so I'm going to destroy the box. So technically, that aligns his goals with the Green Goblin. He was the perfect tool for Goblin to manipulate. When Max was in the apartment with the other villains, you kind of got to see his old socially anxious self just kind of emerge. Oh, something doesn't feel right. Hey, why are you looking at me like that? Or even when Norman switched to the Goblin, he was like, the hell? What's happening? Which I absolutely loved because it kind of cemented the fact that even after the revamp, Max is still just a little jittery. Let's move on to Doc Ock. Honestly, Doc Ock is the most sympathetic villain here. They did these tiny things, specifically with Doc Ock and with Norman. I don't think they had a chance to do it in the Spider-Man 2 movie with Doc Ock in it because he kind of lost his glasses halfway through that movie. So everybody knows that Doc Ock's arms have these little lights that indicate who's in control. So there's red for the AI and white for Otto. And when he's cured, not only do those lights switch back to white, but his glasses kind of clear a little. I mean, of course, since they're sunglasses, you can kind of see his eyes behind them, but it becomes easier to see his eyes. I think that's really interesting. It's like you can see the fog kind of clear from his head. I like the literal representation of that in the glasses. Honestly, I breathed a sigh of relief when I saw it. I was so happy for him. I was, oh, thank God. Oh, Otto, you're free. And out of everybody here, you had the most potential to do good, I think. But I have to acknowledge that Doc Ock was trying to do good already. He was trying to basically do what Tony Stark did at the beginning of the first Avengers movie, run the city on pure renewable energy. Once he gets back to his universe, if he is put in the exact moment that he left, he would be able to use the arc reactor that he took with him to stabilize the machine and then actually run the city on renewable energy. I hope that that's what happens. He might still get arrested because he did, you know, cause a bunch of commotion. I'm trying to remember if he killed anybody. I don't know if he did though. Also, Doc Ock contributed to two of my favorite just frames. I loved the way that the camera, I just love the way that it was filmed when Electro threw Doc Ock out of the building and he used his arms to like grab onto the building and stabilize himself. I absolutely love the framing of this shot and the sound design on the arms as they whine under the weight of the building and holding Otto up, basically stopping his fall. Not to mention the arms totally having personalities of their own, like on the bridge when one of them opens its claws like its mouth is dropping open upon seeing Peter's spider limbs. Or in the apartment when the fabricator breaks through the wall and one of them lets out a small little whine like it's taking a deep breath to calm itself after being scared. That's not something you would have seen in the second Spider-Man movie because they didn't have the CGI for it or the cinematography for it. I just remember marveling at that shot thinking, I'm never gonna see that again. But one of my top 5 frames in the entire movie is like the shot where Otto stops the glider. Not only is the composition of this shot beautiful, but I imagine it's like extra encouragement for Peter 1. Otto was originally vehemently against being cured, but now that his mind has been restored, he's putting in the work for the good guys. On the other hand, Norman was the most pro-cure out of all of them, but he no longer has a say in the matter. I thought, oh wow, what a turn of events. But the frame itself is deceptive because it looks like Otto has all of this power and intimidation, but the Goblin does have a habit of hiding before dropping a bomb, both figuratively and in this case, quite literally. Also, when the Goblin spun on his glider and chopped off one of Otto's arms, the fact that Otto reacted in pain I thought was a really fun callback to how those arms are literally connected to his nervous system through his spine. I remember those needles. No, let's talk about that whole freaking scene where Doc Ock is cured. He goes, he cures Electro. He totally takes the arc reactor with him. Sneaky, sneaky. He has that reunion scene with Peter 2. I've seen a bunch of people just in comments of like YouTube videos kind of talking about this topic, is that people were like, well, why didn't Tobey Spider-Man Peter 2 have a moment with Norman? At the end of the first movie, the Goblin said, I've been a father figure to you, be a son to me. And I'm over here going, excuse you, what about Harry? Like, I know it's not Norman talking right now, because you wouldn't have said that. Norman does care for Harry. He didn't really have the time to, but he did. The last thing that Peter 2 ever said to Norman was, I had a father, his name was Ben Parker. And that's it. Peter 2 kind of severs ties with Norman right then and there. Norman's death wasn't going to change any of that. And I think the filmmakers actually saw that and kind of saw the finality of it and decided to not push it. Besides, I mean, I'm pretty sure Norman was still processing things at the end there, so I just say we leave him alone. I feel like those two definitely had a more mutually beneficial relationship in terms of like the mentor-student dynamic. I liked it, and I'm glad that they had that scene where Peter was just like, oh my gosh, I never thought I'd see this. You're alive, you're sane. And then Otto just going, how are you, dear boy? I just went, oh, that's so sad. Also, Doc Ock has the best reflexes ever out of anybody with the spider sense, because the moment that the Goblin came down from the skies, Doc Ock protected Strange by taking out the Goblin's evil red wings or whatever those things were. Not only that, protected Max as the Statue of Liberty collapsed. I'm like, the dude has the fastest reflexes on the planet, and I think that's a wonderful callback to the fact that he couldn't save his wife when his machine got out of hand. Sadness. Okay. Doc Ock could have done so much more, and honestly, like, I hope that when he made it back to his original reality, he accepts, of course, his mistakes and then moves on. Norman Osborn. Man, oh man. I think that back when I had just come off the high of seeing the movie, I went back in my original discussion to talk about Norman at least 3 times. I have never experienced a Marvel villain that was so sympathetic in the first half and then made me want to sprint away as fast as my legs could carry me in the second half. Otto and Norman are both victims of their own genius. They both thought that they could do something good, or at least in Norman's case, achieve success, but I won't undermine that because he did experiment on himself and not just some hired hand. I live in an area where people don't really get excited, even on opening night, for a movie, and they're very polite about it in the theater. Now, people knew from the trailer that they were going to be seeing Doc Ock, so when Doc Ock did show up, there were like a few exclamations of like, oh, no, yay, Doc Ock, yes, something, just very, very small whisperings of excitedness. But there was applause in the theater when that glider just slid out of the smoke. Like, I didn't know how much of a nostalgia impact the Green Goblin had on these people, but I guess it was just a huge factor. I thought the scene, of course, that called back Norman's conversations with the Green Goblin, they had one in an alley, and Norman took a rock, by the way, not his bare hands, because apparently the movie didn't want to show off the fact that Norman had super strength, not just yet, and smashed the goblin mask and then ran away, mirroring, of course, the scene from Spider-Man 2, where Peter took his suit and threw it away and walked off. But when May called Peter and said, hey, one of your villains just walked in, my heart just hit my rib cage. I was on high alert, my guard was up, and Peter flings open the door and Norman is just sitting there. And I mean, like Peter, I was completely thrown. That is also in the script, that Peter is completely thrown. But then he started to try to explain himself, especially with the line about like somebody in his house, about Oscorp not existing, and his son. Suffice to say, my guard being like all the way up here went all the way down here. That one line just cemented the fact that he had nowhere to go. I wanted to help. I mean, I wanted to give him a hug. I was just, oh, you poor soul. He doesn't even trust his own mind. He can't even trust himself. And I mean, when he's talking to May, he's like, I'm here. I'm in this I'm in this place. I don't understand. I don't know where I am. I'm someone else. And when he's in control, bad things happen. Like, dude. The fact that Norman, like, when he finally came back to himself, he was very much like, oh no, what have I done? Like, you could just see the oh god, I can tell just by looking at you that the Goblin did something. What did he do? What did I do? I mean, as the movie progressed, I was completely okay with him just being Norman. Like, no Goblin attached. But of course that's not how it goes, and we will get to the Green Goblin in a second. There was just this sort of tentative awe that Dafoe put into the character as he like tiptoed around the technology and in this state of just wonderment and curiosity, and just slowly adapted to it. I love how Norman is just eternally curious about all of this, and Doc Ock is just like, leave me alone. But he was the most pro-cure out of all of the villains. He actually wanted to help Peter. He helped him make a cure for Otto, and even offered him a job at Oscorp. Like, that was strangely sweet. We all know that like Norman favors Peter over Harry in any universe, but here it was like, it's already been established that Norman misses his son, and we don't know about that, by the way. He just said my son. Does that mean that Harry Osborn could exist? That Norman ran into a version of Harry that didn't recognize him or something? Or does it mean that Harry also doesn't exist in the MCU? I mean, I'd be okay with both, to be honest. It does beg the question, why trail off? And I mean, I do have to step aside and praise Willem Dafoe's acting in this movie just for a minute. Norman and the Goblin, I can't even say that they're two sides of the same coin. It's more like they're on two ends of a line. The way he was able to go from playing this sweet, fragile, helpless old man to psychotic, unhinged psychopath in 2.5 seconds is absolutely brilliant. It was a slap to the face and it scared me. Notice that aside from the feast scene, Norman's movements are very calm, controlled, and minimal, really. But as the Goblin, he moves with every word he says. I mean, even when he's webbed to dummy in the spider sense scene, he moves his head to put emphasis on certain words. I don't remember Norman doing that. Or if he did, it wasn't noticeable. It was very easy to believe that I was watching a completely different person. That deserves recognition. Let's break down my favorite scene, because that was actually a pretty good segue in terms of the movie. I know there are so many people whose favorite scene was like Andrew Garfield showing up or Tobey Maguire showing up, and we'll get to that in a second. But my favorite scene is the spider sense scene. The cinematography was on point for this scene. We got this odd ringing in the ears for Peter's spider sense, and the way that the background just blurred around him. And the camera only moved with Peter. So for one specific moment, we were spinning with it, and it was so disorienting. And so it made me so uneasy. It put me on edge. I mean, some people compared it to a panic attack. And I completely understand that. It felt like a panic attack. But the point that really drives this scene is not the cinematography. It's that we're not supposed to know what's causing Peter's spider sense to go off. Because of the arrival of J. Jameson, played marvelously by J.K. Simmons, I might add, with the cameras, and Connors is in the truck going, "And so it begins." We think that it has something to do with those characters. But looking back on it, every villain, save for Otto, who at this point really isn't a villain anymore, had a line that made us suspicious of that character. Within 5 minutes of the spider sense scene, Sandman.
I don't trust anyone.
Electro.
Something feels off. I don't like this.
Norman.
Just me.
And Lizard.
And so it begins.
But even as Peter's drifting through the room, all of the villains ask him questions, but the only one he answers is Norman.
What's wrong?
I don't know.
And then he calls for May. His sense was telling him that May was in danger because of the Goblin. I can't with the details in this movie. They make you pay attention so much. But Peter eventually realizes it's Norman. He webs him to dummy. And here's where I admit that I was naive and stupid. So caught up was I in Marvel's web of lies that I actually expected Norman to question Peter or voice his concerns or act confused or something. I was not expecting what actually happened. After watching it a few times, you can see the camera pan past what looks like surprise on Norman's face. So even if the Goblin was like right there at the surface, I don't think he was completely in control until the camera panned back to Norman's face, in which case his head is lowered slightly, his eyes are a bit wider, and there's this rasp in his voice. And I'm just sitting there going, that's the tell for the Goblin. Oh no. And because they nailed everything, my guard immediately goes all the way back up. There was a man in that apartment who could fry everyone in 2 seconds flat, and now I was scared. My inner monologue was like, Peter, run for it. Get Aunt May, take Aunt May, and run now. As fast as you can. And again, it's been years since I've seen the Raimi film. Like, I am an adult, okay? I saw that movie when I was a child, and that version of the Goblin didn't scare me. And yet, my heart is pounding a mile a minute, and it wasn't until later that I realized nothing had technically happened yet. So why was I so on edge? And it's because, you want to know why? It's because we've never seen the Goblin so calm and in control of a situation. He said it himself. He's been watching Peter 1, just letting Norman drive while he's a quiet observer, just listening, making note of certain things, and then, even while Peter still thinks he has him, the Goblin goes straight for the heart just as he always has.
I saw how she trapped you, fighting her holy moral mission.
Challenging Peter's self-interest and morality and singling out Aunt May and voicing the suspicion that Electro is obviously harboring. Of course, there's no way that the Goblin knew about the events of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but that line calls back to Electro's final goal.
Gods don't have to choose.
And I will be like a god to them.
A god named Sparkles?
The Goblin knew exactly what he was doing, and I'm pretty sure he knew the result as well. He knew where this was all going to go. And everything went off perfectly, exactly the way he wanted it to go, I think.
We take.
May. Run.
So the Goblin just casually breaks the web holding him in place. A moment that shouldn't be overlooked, by the way. Remember, these are the same webs that did this without breaking, and then proceeds to throw Peter through 6 floors. I counted. We have never seen that level of super strength from a seemingly normal human being. All I could do was just sit there dumbstruck as it happened. I mean, we've never seen Cap throw somebody through a wall. Have we seen that? I mean, we've seen Cap do a lot of other pretty amazing feats of strength, but has he thrown somebody through a wall? Has he thrown somebody through 2 walls? Has he thrown somebody through a floor? You know, a floor with probably metal, because walls are thinner than floors. The Goblin throws Peter through a wall, and then instead of stepping through the hole that he just made in the apartment, he breaks down the door and just walks out the door. It's like, I guess the more damage, the better, I suppose. Because of the intensity of this fight, I think that one of the best costume choices they made in the entire movie was smashing the mask. so that Defoe could have a full range of expression to add to the Goblin specifically. I mean, the moment when Peter starts punching him and he just starts laughing, I was terrified. I remember my friend who's sitting next to me who hasn't seen any of the Spider-Man movies just kind of taps me and goes, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, no, I don't know what's going on anymore. The more that Peter fought the Goblin, everything that Norman tried to do to conceal the identity of the Goblin started to fray and come apart. So like the hoodie got ripped to shreds, and you see like the metallic green underneath it. At the very end of that fight, the Goblin suit is completely exposed. That's something that you overlook at first, but then like the moment the Goblin hops on the glider, it's like the ensemble's complete. There he is. Even at the end of the fight when May died, I heard people sniffling in the audience, but I couldn't cry for the life of me. I was still in shock. I mean, she said the line, like the original line, which is wonderful, but the good guys don't die in the MCU. That's not how this works. I can count the number of good guys that have officially died in the MCU on one hand. In fact, I can put them right here. But Peter's acting during May's death scene was amazing here. He said a line that is very easily overlooked, the "it's just me and you," calling back to a scene in Amazing Spider-Man Homecoming.
It's just me and you.
Lost a Stark internship.
Very sad. Just to remind us that Peter is now an orphan and has no one to go back to. No way home, because there is no home for him. Not anymore. Now let's talk about the best part of the movie, when the Peters came through. Andrew Garfield was like a sweet middle child throughout all of this. The genuine pep talk. Like Andrew Garfield, I feel like Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man doesn't think too highly of himself. And I'm not saying that as a joke. I mean, like, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man never really recovered from being depressed over Gwen's death, and he blamed himself for it. Absolutely. Like, of course he blamed Harry, but like he blamed himself for it the most. You hear him go like, "Oh, I'm lame. And then Tobey going, no, you are amazing. You are amazing." And I was just like, oh, he needed to hear that. You have no idea how much he needed to hear that. Andrew Garfield, Spider-Man wanted brothers, and now he has them, and they're all just radiating such sweet sibling energy, and I love it. Andrew Garfield, like, I loved that, well, Tobey got his reunion with Otto. Andrew Garfield got his reunion with Max. When Electro was like, "I just thought you were gonna be black." And then the genuine, "Oh man, I'm sorry." That was so sweet. And he's like, "There's gotta be a black Spider-Man somewhere out there." And I'm like, "Well, we already got the Prowler!" Who's to say we won't get anybody else? I love how Tobey was very, like, level-headed, and he'd obviously been doing this for much longer than the other two Peters had. I thought it was interesting when Tobey and Andrew saw each other. They both immediately moved to attack, which I thought, were they summoned from other universes, or had they seen, like, doppelgangers before and didn't like what they saw? Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man said, "Wait, there's magic in this universe too." Maybe thinking, "Oh my god, magic, there's magic here too, really?" Or magic exists too, like maybe Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man came into contact with some magic. I don't know. Easily the best part of the fight at the Statue of Liberty was Andrew Garfield saving MJ. Because honestly, like, before the Marvel Universe took over for Spider-Man, the last that we knew about Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man is that he was still grieving for Gwen, and he was just beginning to pick up the pieces of him being Spider-Man again. So that meant that however long the Andrew Garfield universe lasted, he was agonizing over that moment, thinking how he could have saved her differently. And then he saved MJ, and he started crying, and he went, "Are you okay?" Like he still couldn't believe that he actually caught her. And she just went, "Yeah." And then he starts crying, and she's like, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm okay now." It's like, "Yeah, I'm okay now." What a bet that when Peter 3 went back to his world, he visited Gwen and he told her what happened, and tears. I loved Andrew Garfield's energy just throughout this entire thing. Just the,
I love you guys.
Is that a band? Are you in a band?
Peter 1, Peter 2,
Peter 2.
Peter 3.
Peter 3.
All right, let's do this.
Oh gosh, Andrew Garfield was born to play Spider-Man. I mean, they all in their respective, like, differences, I feel like all three of them were born to play Spider-Man. And the fact that they all got to be Spider-Man together on screen like this is just the fulfillment of, like, 20 years of you know, waiting for it. I loved it. I loved it. Tobey Maguire, again, like, his wisdom knows no bounds. Like, honestly, Peter 2 was the only one who was able to talk Peter 1 out of killing the Goblin.
Marko, Dillon, and look, I think that I can repair the devices.
I think I can make an anti-serum for Dr. Osborn.
Been thinking about it a long time. Gotta cure all of them. That's what we do.
One of my favorite moments in the film was when he picked up the glider and he's about to deliver the final blow, and then Peter 2 stops him. Because it was, and the look in Toby's eyes, just the, I know and I understand, but this is not the way. Peter 1 was about to John Walker the Goblin with the same weapon that he used to kill May. And would he have succeeded? He might have become the darkest Spider-Man in cinematic history. But Peter 2 got his redemption by stepping between the glider and Norman, something that he'd probably been thinking about for years. And not just for Norman, but for Harry as well. James Franco's Harry was living a normal life until his dad died. Erase Norman's death from the Raimi universe, and Peter 2, Harry, and Mary Jane live a relatively normal life as best friends, but they all get a happy ending. But then the Goblin stabbed him. Boy, the reactions that got. I personally didn't believe that he was going to die from that, so I didn't really react as viscerally as some of the other people in the theater did. Like, I heard so many from the audience. I heard someone go, "No!" I almost laughed out loud. But I saw it as Peter 2 not only stopping the glider, but taking the hit for Norman. Though I'm pretty sure the Goblin only saw it as Peter 2 trying to interfere. It's like the Goblin has lost interest in Peter 2 at the moment. Like, you turned down my offer, okay, I'm done with you. I'm busy trying to shatter this other kid. Move aside. Tobey's Spider-Man was the OG. He delivered. I thought if we were going to see them, both of them, the movie was going to suddenly start becoming more about them. Either that or they were going to have a 5-minute cameo and that was it. Neither of those things happened. We got Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield being mentors to young Peter Parker, Tom Holland. And the whole line that tied them all together, the with great power comes great responsibility. And then tied all of them together and they all have like a bond that can never be spoken of again. Oh, it made me so happy. And I also love that they didn't share too much about Garfield, like about Peter 2 and Peter 3's lives after the movies that they were in. Like, yeah, it was implied that Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man killed some people. There was some article, like, somewhere that I read that said that Maguire's Spider-Man was running something called Peter Parker Industries, which might be something in the comics that I don't know about. I love seeing my hand glow. I don't know what it is, but that's why I'm moving my hand a lot. Sorry if it's distracting, but I like seeing it. So, of course, there's that to figure out. I would love to see, like, apparently there was supposed to be a deleted scene at the end of the episode that showed Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire going back to their respective universes and what it was like for them there. But instead we got the Multiverse of Madness trailer, which, to be honest, I was looking forward to that the moment that Doctor Strange came out in theaters. As I heard it was going to be Marvel's first crack at a horror movie, and oh my gosh, if you don't want to see a Marvel horror movie, and I kind of want to see a Marvel horror movie, I want to see them try, at least, because that's probably the only way you will get me to watch a horror movie. Unless, I mean, okay, so The Invisible Man and A Quiet Place were hard exceptions. They really threw me for a loop with that line where Tom was like, "I'm not gonna brag, but I was in the Avengers." And then Tobey went,
The Avengers!
"Yeah,
That's great! Thank you!
and I was like, okay, so wait, this version of Spider-Man knows about the Avengers? And then, nope, Tobey's goes,
What is that?
them being mentors, just, I love that. But I also love how they were both mentors for, like, something very different. Like, I would say that Andrew Garfield, just because he had no knowledge of Norman Osborn at the time, and his Green Goblin, like, yes, like, Harry Osborn from The Amazing Spider-Man 2 definitely broke Peter 3. I will say that. Like, props to first of all, the amazing Goblin score in that movie. The amazing Electro score, which also, that's something else I needed to mention. All of the themes, while they weren't entirely, like, present and there, Michael Giacchino didn't, like, just straight up pull those themes, but they were sampled. Like, you heard the Electro theme when Electro opened his eyes. I was like, oh, I recognize that. I think in No Good Deed, like, sprinkled in there is a more menacing twist to the quiet and kind of sinister but not altogether loud Goblin theme. that Norman had. Of course, the Goblin theme in Amazing Spider-Man 2 is a whole other beast, and I love it still. I think Doc Ock's theme was used, I'm not sure. I saw Danny Elfman credited in credits as they were rolling, so I know that the themes were used. Shield of Pain was a good soundtrack. No Good Deed was the best soundtrack, I think. I want to see Daredevil and Spider-Man team up. I really hope that happens. Ned has magic, and honestly, like, the fact that he's wearing gold and blue, and the fact that he has magic, and even the fact that he said, "I promise I won't turn into a supervillain and try to kill you." I think that those were all teasing Ned Leeds as Hobgoblin in the near future. That's what everybody's saying. I don't know who the Hobgoblin is. Does it have anything to do with the Green Goblin? I don't really think so, since the Green Goblin was cured in this timeline. Like the very first Avengers movie, when all of these movies crisscrossed and we didn't know that they were connected until they were. It's like that feeling. So yeah, over an hour of footage. It'll probably take a very long time to edit, but I'm going to put my all into this. Probably as a thank you for 500 subscribers, let's be honest. This is my thank you for 500 subscribers. So yeah, thank you so much for staying. Be sure to like and comment and subscribe. You don't have to, but it would be cool if you did. I am trying to make this a source of income for me. So again, you don't have to, but I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much for staying, and have a nice day.